Doctor pressed her face against the observation window and watched the creature inside the containment cell. The thing looked like a shadow made solid, 7 feet tall and moving like smoke given shape. Its eyes glowed red in the darkness, and when it turned toward her, she felt a chill run down her spine. Still studying that nightmare human. Turned to see Ara, one of the warriors who worked security on the station. The alien stood 8 feet tall, covered in blue scales and carrying weapons that could cut through steel. Even the mighty were afraid of the creatures in these cells. "They're not nightmares," said. "They're just animals with different survival methods." Ara made a sound like grinding rocks, which knew was laughter. "Animals? That Void Stalker killed 3 of my best warriors on 7. It can walk through walls and smell fear from miles away." Looked back at the creature. The Void Stalker was one of 47 different species kept in this research station. All of them were the galaxy's most dangerous predators. Things so deadly that entire civilizations had been wiped out by just a few of them. The research station floated in space around a giant gas planet. It was the most secure facility in the galaxy, built by the 5 greatest species working together. They had provided energy shields that could stop a supernova. They had created crystal computers that could think faster than any mind. They had built weapons that could destroy planets. They had made stealth systems that could hide from gods. And then there were the humans, the species to join the Galactic Research Consortium. Most aliens thought humans were weak and foolish for wanting to study these monsters instead of destroying them. "Your methods are strange," Ara continued. "No energy shields, no psionic barriers, no quantum locks. You just sit and watch them." Smiled. "My grandmother taught me that the best way to understand a predator is to think like prey. Watch how they move, learn their patterns, understand what makes them hunt." "Your grandmother sounds like a fool who should have been eaten." "She was special forces, spent 30 years tracking dangerous animals and dangerous people, never lost a target." Ara's scales shifted color, which meant she was confused. "You come from a species of hunters." "Every human does. We just forgot it for a while when we built cities and spaceships." The station's main computer, controlled by a hive mind, spoke through the walls. "Doctor, please report to Lab 7. The swarm larvae are showing unusual behavior patterns." Sighed. The swarm larvae were another nightmare species. They could eat through any metal and turn it into more of themselves. One larva could become 1,000,000 in just a few days if left alone. She walked through the station's white corridors, passing other research labs. In one window, she saw a phase hunter floating in a gravity bubble. The creature looked like a giant insect made of glass and light. It could disappear and reappear anywhere it wanted, usually inside its victim's chest. In another lab, a team of scientists were studying something called a soul ripper. Couldn't see it because it existed in a different dimension, but she could feel its presence like ice water in her veins. Lab 7 was in the lower levels of the station. Took the elevator down, noting how quiet everything was. Most of the research staff worked during the day shift. Only a few beings stayed overnight to monitor the containments. The swarm larvae were kept in a special chamber made of material that couldn't be eaten. Looked at the readings on her computer and frowned. The larvae were moving in patterns she had never seen before. Instead of trying to eat their way out, they were building something. She was so focused on the readings that she almost missed the first warning alarm. Red lights started flashing in the corridor. The station's emergency system announced, "Solar storm approaching. All non-essential personnel please move to safe areas." Solar storms were normal around this gas giant. The station's shields were strong enough to handle them, kept working. Then the lights went out. Emergency power kicked in, casting everything in a red glow. Heard something that made her blood run cold, the sound of containment fields shutting down. "Warning," the computer said, but its voice was different now, full of static. "Multiple containment breaches detected. Warning, Multiple containment breaches detected. Ran to the nearest observation window. The swarm larvae were no longer in their chamber. They had eaten through the emergency locks in seconds and were spreading across the ceiling like living metal. An alarm klaxon began wailing. Heard explosions from the upper levels. Through the station's communication system, she heard voices screaming in languages from across the galaxy. Her wrist communicator crackled to life. It was Ara, human. The Void Stalkers are loose. 3 of them just tore through the main security door. We're evacuating. Ran toward the emergency elevator, but it was already moving up. She could hear the evacuation ships launching from the station's docking bays. The entire alien crew was fleeing. She tried to call the elevator back down, but nothing happened. The computer systems were failing one by one as the solar storm hit the station's damaged systems. A new sound echoed through the corridor, a low howling that seemed to come from everywhere at once. Knew that sound from her research. Void Stalkers called to each other when they were hunting. She ran back to Lab 7 and sealed the door. Through the window, she could see shapes moving in the corridor. Some were the liquid metal forms of swarm larvae. Others flickered in and out of sight like phase hunters. Her communicator crackled once more. "Doctor, this is Captain Ra of the evacuation ship Golden Wind. We're receiving no response from station control. Are you still alive?" Press the transmit button. "I'm here, Captain, trapped in the lower levels." "Hold on, human. We're trying to reach you." Waited, then, "Doctor, I'm sorry. The entire station is overrun with predators. We cannot risk a rescue mission. We're transmitting your location to the consortium. Perhaps a military force can reach you in a few days." A few days. Looked at the creatures moving past her window and knew she didn't have a few days. She had maybe a few hours before they found her. "Understood, Captain. Tell my family I love them." "You have our respect, Doctor. You died with honor." The communication went silent. Was alone on a station full of creatures that had destroyed entire civilizations. Every alien species in the galaxy feared these monsters. But wasn't like other species. She was human. She opened her grandmother's emergency kit and began to plan. Opened her grandmother's emergency kit for the first time since joining the space program. Inside were things that most aliens would call primitive. Scent masking gel, noise-dampening cloth, and small tools for setting traps. Her grandmother had carried this kit through 30 years of hunting the most dangerous creatures on Earth. "When something is hunting you," her grandmother had said, "you have 2 choices. Run until you die tired or make it afraid to keep chasing." Spread the scent gel on her clothes and skin. It smelled like metal and chemicals, masking her human scent. Then she wrapped the noise cloth around her boots and began moving through the station like a ghost. The corridors had become a war zone. Swarm larvae had eaten through entire sections of walls, turning the metal into more of themselves. Their numbers had grown from dozens to hundreds in just the first hour. They moved like a silver tide, flowing through the station and consuming everything they touched. Stayed away from the main corridors. She used maintenance shafts and service tunnels, spaces too small for the larger predators. But she wasn't just hiding, she was learning. Through security cameras that still worked, she watched the creatures establish their territories. The Void Stalkers had claimed the upper levels, near the command center. They moved in packs of 3, communicating with sounds like breaking glass. Had studied their hunting patterns for months, but seeing them free was different. They were faster, smarter, and more coordinated than she had expected. The phase hunters took the middle levels. These creatures were lone hunters, each one claiming several rooms as its domain. They would disappear and reappear without warning, leaving crystallized corpses of maintenance robots in their wake. The swarm larvae were spreading everywhere, but they avoided areas with strong electromagnetic fields. Made a note of this weakness. Other creatures roamed freely as well. She saw a Soul Ripper's dimensional distortion tear through a blast door like it was paper. Something called a night terror was stalking through the recreation areas, feeding on the fear pheromones left behind by the evacuating aliens. Reached Lab 12, where they kept chemical supplies. She needed materials to survive, but more importantly, she needed weapons. Not energy weapons or plasma cannons like the other species used. She needed tools that worked the way human hunters had always worked. She mixed compounds from the chemical stores, creating substances her grandmother had taught her about. Scents that confused predators, chemicals that made surfaces too slippery to walk on, compounds that created small explosions when triggered by movement. As she worked, something scratched at the lab door. Froze. Through the reinforced window, she saw a phase hunter testing the entrance. The creature looked like a giant praying mantis made of crystal and light. Its head turned toward her, and she could see intelligence in its faceted eyes. The phase hunter raised one claw and touched the door. Its claw began to fade, becoming translucent as it prepared to phase through the barrier. Did something that surprised even herself. Instead of running or hiding, she stared directly at the creature. She stood straight, shoulders back, and met its alien gaze without blinking. Her grandmother's voice echoed in her memory. Predators understand body language better than words. Show fear and they'll chase. Show weakness and they'll attack. But show them you're a threat and sometimes they'll think twice. The phase hunter paused. Its claw again. The creature tilted its head, studying her with the same intensity she was studying it. Took one step toward the door. The phase hunter stepped back. They stared at each other for long seconds. Then the creature made a sound like breaking bells and disappeared, reappearing somewhere else in the station. His hands were shaking, but she felt something she hadn't expected: excitement. For the first time since the breakout began, one of these galactic nightmare monsters had backed down from a human. She finished mixing her compounds and moved to the next phase of her plan. The station's computer core was still partially functional. If she could reach it, she might be able to restore some systems or at least send a better distress signal. The computer core was on level 5, right in the middle of phase hunter territory. Studied the security monitors and tracked the creature's movement patterns. Phase hunters were ambush predators. They liked to appear behind their prey or inside enclosed spaces, but they had weaknesses too. Set her first trap in corridor C7. She spilled a chemical mixture on the floor that would react to energy. When a phase hunter tried to materialize there, the reaction would create a flash of light and heat that would stun the creature. Her second trap was psychological. She left a trail of human scent leading to storage bay 3, then filled the bay with a compound that created electromagnetic interference. Phase hunters used quantum fields to teleport, and strong electromagnetic waves confused their abilities. The third trap was the most dangerous. Positioned herself in the open corridor between the computer core and the storage bay. She was using herself as bait. She heard the phase hunter before she saw it, a sound like reality tearing. The creature appeared 30 feet away, its crystal claws already extended for the kill. Didn't run. She stood her ground and began walking toward it. The phase hunter hesitated. In all its existence, prey had never approached it willingly. Its predatory instincts were confused by this behavior. Kept walking, 20 feet, 15 feet, 10 feet. The phase hunter tried to disappear and reappear behind her, but had predicted this. The creature materialized directly on her chemical trap. Light flashed and the air crackled with energy. The stunned phase hunter stumbled and was already moving. She had prepared one more surprise, a gravity field generator taken from Lab 9. She activated it, and the creature found itself pinned to the floor by 3 times normal gravity. Looked down at the trapped predator. My grandmother always said the best way to hunt something dangerous is to make it hunt you first. Lead them where you want them to go. She left the phase hunter trapped and continued to the computer core. But as she walked through the station, began to notice something disturbing. The attacks were becoming more coordinated. Void stalkers were working with swarm larvae. Phase hunters were avoiding areas where other predators had set ambushes. These creatures weren't just loose, something was organizing them. Reached the computer core and accessed the station's central database. What she found there made her blood run cold. According to the records, there was one more containment cell she didn't know about, a cell hidden in the station's deepest level. The file was marked with warnings in a dozen alien languages. Inside that cell was something called an Ancient One, a creature so old and dangerous that the first galactic civilizations had barely managed to imprison it. The containment breach had weakened its prison. It was waking up. And it was calling to every predator on the station, organizing them into an army. Looked at the data and realized the truth. She wasn't trapped on a station with escaped monsters. She was trapped with something that commanded monsters. Something that had been sleeping for 1,000,000 years was about to fully awaken. And when it did, it wouldn't just destroy the station. It would use these creatures to destroy every civilization in the galaxy. The elevator to the deepest level had been sealed with locks that required authorization from all 5 species in the consortium. Used emergency codes to override them, knowing that whatever was down there was already partially free anyway. The elevator descended for what felt like hours, though her chronometer showed only minutes. The walls changed from the station's normal white metal to something older, darker. This level had been built differently from the rest of the station, using materials and technologies didn't recognize. When the doors opened, she stepped into a corridor that felt wrong. The air was thick and seemed to move on its own. The lights flickered in patterns that hurt to look at, and somewhere in the distance, she could hear something like breathing, but slower and deeper than any living thing should be. Checked her equipment. Her grandmother's tools seemed small and foolish in this place, but they were all she had. She followed the corridor toward the source of that terrible breathing. The hallway ended at a massive chamber carved from a single piece of black stone. In the center of the chamber was a pillar of crackling energy, and inside that pillar was something that made his mind hurt to perceive. The Ancient One was beautiful and horrible at the same time. It looked like a star given shape, constantly shifting between forms that her eyes couldn't quite focus on. One moment it seemed like a giant made of light and shadow. The next moment it was a collection of eyes and tentacles floating in space. Then it was something else entirely, something her brain refused to process. So the Ancient One spoke, and its voice came from the walls, the floor, the air itself. The little mammals have sent an explorer. Felt terror trying to take hold of her mind, but she pushed it down. Her grandmother had trained her to function through fear, to think clearly when everything in her body screamed to run. "You're the one controlling the predators," she said. The Ancient One's laughter was like the sound of galaxies colliding. "Controlling? Child, I created most of them, shaped them from the fears of lesser species, bred them in the dark spaces between stars. They are my children, and they have been lonely during my imprisonment." Looked at the energy field holding the creature. Cracks were spreading through it like ice breaking in spring. "How long have you been here?" "Time is meaningless to one such as I. Your species barely existed when I last walked among the stars. I remember when there were just sparks of electricity in gas clouds. I watched them crawl from their caves and build their first weapons. I saw civilizations rise and fall like waves on an endless shore." The Ancient One shifted and caught glimpses of things that might have been memories. Planets covered in impossible cities, creatures the size of moons, wars fought with weapons that reshaped reality itself. "You've been sleeping for millions of years," said. "Why wake up now?" "The galaxy has grown soft. These young races think they are apex predators because they build ships and energy weapons. They have forgotten what real predation means. It is time to remind them. Began walking around the chamber, studying the containment system while keeping the Ancient One talking. The creature seemed amused by her movement, watching her like a cat watches a mouse. "What makes you think you're better than them?" asked. "Better?" The Ancient One's form shifted to something with too many teeth. "I am not better, little mammal. I am inevitable. I am the darkness that waits at the end of every light. I am the fear that drives evolution forward." "You're a predator," said, "just a very old one." The Ancient One went still. In millions of years of existence, no prey species had ever spoken to it so casually. "You interest me, human. Your species is unknown to me, yet you walk in my presence without begging or screaming. Tell me about your kind." Continued circling the chamber, nodding weak points in the containment field. "We're persistence predators. We evolved on a world full of things faster, stronger, and meaner than us. So we learned to be smarter, more patient, and more stubborn than anything else." "Persistence predators," the Ancient One mused. "I have encountered such before. They rarely survive contact with true apex predators." "That's where you're wrong," said. "We didn't just survive contact with apex predators on our world. We became them." She stopped walking and faced the creature directly. "Humans didn't evolve to avoid being prey. We evolved to be better predators than anything that hunted us. We outthought cave bears, out-endured mammoths, and out-hunted toothed cats. When we ran out of dangerous animals to hunt, we started hunting each other. When that got boring, we went to space and found new things to hunt." The Ancient One's attention focused on her like a spotlight made of malice. "You speak of hunting, yet you carry no weapons that could threaten me." Smiled. "That's because I'm not here to fight you. I'm here to understand you." "Understand?" "Every predator has patterns, behaviors, weaknesses. You've been asleep for so long that you're using old tactics against new prey. These species aren't the same ones you knew a million years ago. They've evolved, adapted, become smarter." The Ancient One leaned forward, its massive presence pressing against the weakening containment field. "And what have you learned about me, little hunter?" Pulled out her grandmother's kit and began mixing chemicals. "You're not as powerful as you used to be. This imprisonment weakened you. That's why you need the other predators to act as your army. You can't just destroy the galaxy yourself anymore." "Clever," the Ancient One admitted, "but ultimately meaningless. Even weakened, I am still beyond your comprehension." "Maybe," said, "but here's what I understand about persistence predators. We don't win by being stronger or faster. We win by being more patient and more willing to adapt than our prey." She finished mixing her chemicals and began applying them to points around the containment field. The Ancient One watched with curiosity rather than concern. "You seek to strengthen my prison." "No," said, "I'm giving you a choice." The Ancient One's form shifted to something resembling confusion. "What choice could you possibly offer me?" Stepped back from the containment field and activated her communicator. She began broadcasting on all frequencies, sending her signal to the evacuation ships still orbiting the station. "I'm showing the galaxy what it looks like when a human negotiates with something that thinks it's an apex predator. Every alien species up there thinks your creatures are unbeatable monsters, but I've been hunting them for hours, and they're still just animals with bigger teeth." The Ancient One's voice became darker, more dangerous. "You think to shame me in front of lesser beings?" "I think," said calmly, "that you're about to see why humans don't just survive being prey. We make everything else wonder if maybe they're the prey instead." She walked up to the containment field and placed her hand on it. The energy burned her palm, but she didn't pull away. "So here's your choice, Ancient One. You can break free and try to destroy the galaxy with your army of monsters, but every step of the way you'll have humans hunting you, not running from you, not hiding from you, hunting you." The creatures form into something resembling a massive humanoid made of stars and shadow. "You dare threaten me?" "I'm not threatening you," said. I'm explaining reality. Humans are persistence predators. We don't stop. We don't give up. We learn from every encounter and come back stronger. You might kill me, but my species will study what I've learned. They'll find your weaknesses and exploit them. The Ancient One was silent for long moments. When it spoke again, its voice was thoughtful. In all my existence, I have never encountered a species that treated predation as a conversation rather than a battle. Smiled, welcome to humanity. We're the species that taught predators to be afraid of being prey. The containment field flickered and realized the Ancient One could break free at any moment. But it was choosing not to. It was choosing to keep talking. Because for the first time in millions of years, it had met something that genuinely interested it. The Ancient One's laughter filled the chamber like the sound of dying stars. You amuse me, little human. Very well, I shall test your claims. Let us see how your species handles true predation. Felt the creature's will pressing against the station's systems. Throughout the levels above, every monster that had broken containment received the same command. Find the human and bring her to me alive. I will enjoy watching you run, the Ancient One said. Picked up her equipment and headed for the chamber exit. I think you're going to be disappointed. She had spent the last several hours learning the station's layout and the predator's behaviors. Now, she was going to use that knowledge in ways the Ancient One couldn't predict. Reached the upper levels as the first wave of creatures converged on her location. 3 void stalkers phased through the walls, their red eyes glowing with hunger. Behind them came a pack of swarm larvae, their metal bodies flowing like liquid death. Instead of running, stood her ground in the corridor's center. She had chosen this spot carefully. It was directly under one of the station's gravity generators. The void stalkers moved toward her with the confidence of creatures that had never met resistance. They could smell her adrenaline, but something was wrong. Where was the fear? Every prey species they had ever hunted radiated terror. This human smelled excited. Waited until they were 10 feet away, then activated the gravity generator she had rigged to overload. The corridor filled with crushing force that slammed the void stalkers to the floor. They tried to phase away, but the gravitational distortion interfered with their abilities. The swarm larvae surged forward to help, but was already moving. She had prepared for this moment, spreading a chemical compound on the floor that reacted violently with their metal bodies. As they flowed over it, explosions rippled through their ranks. But wasn't done. While the survivors regrouped, she did something that froze them in place. She began hunting them. Pulled out a device her grandmother had taught her to make from simple materials, a sonic emitter that produced frequencies that interfered with the void stalker's sensory organs. The creatures stumbled, their perfect predatory coordination shattered. She moved through them like a dancer, staying just out of reach while herding them toward prepared traps. When one void stalker tried to flank her, she triggered an electromagnetic pulse that disrupted its phase ability, trapping it halfway through a wall. When another tried to leap at her, she used a gravity field to redirect its momentum into a bank of high-voltage equipment. The Ancient One's voice echoed through the station. Impossible. They are apex predators. How are you defeating them? Activated her communicator so her response would be broadcast to the evacuation ship still watching from orbit. Because they're not apex predators, they're specialists. They evolved to hunt specific types of prey using specific methods. But humans, we're generalists. We adapt. A phase hunter materialized behind her, its crystal claws extended, spun around and threw a handful of metallic dust into the air. When the creature tried to phase away, the dust interfered with its quantum field, causing it to solidify with one arm still inside a wall. Your creatures rely on intimidation and overwhelming force, continued, addressing the Ancient One while moving toward her next prepared position. But humans evolved alongside predators that used the same tactics. We learned to think our way out of situations where we were outmatched. She reached Laboratory 5, where she had spent hours preparing her masterpiece. The room was filled with devices taken from all over the station: gravity generators, electromagnetic field projectors, sonic emitters, and chemical dispersal systems. A dozen creatures converged on the laboratory: void stalkers, phase hunters, something called a reality ripper, and a swarm of smaller predators she didn't recognize. They filled the doorway, certain they had trapped their prey. Looked at them calmly. My grandmother taught me something important about hunting dangerous animals. Sometimes the best trap is to let them think they've caught you. She activated every device in the room simultaneously. The laboratory became a killing field designed specifically for predators. Gravity fields pinned flying creatures to the floor. Electromagnetic pulses disrupted phase abilities. Sonic frequencies interfered with sensory organs. Chemical compounds reacted with anything that moved through them. But the most devastating weapon was psychological. As the creatures struggled against her traps, didn't hide or flee, she moved among them with the calm confidence of an apex predator in its own territory. When a void stalker managed to break free from a gravity field, didn't run from it, she walked toward it. The creature hesitated, confused by prey that behaved like a predator. In that moment of hesitation, she triggered a sonic burst that stunned it long enough to activate another trap. When a phase hunter tried to disappear and reappear behind her, was already turning toward where it would materialize. She had learned their patterns, and now she was using those patterns against them. The Ancient One's voice was no longer amused. "This is not possible. You are a prey species. Prey species run, they hide, they die." Stood in the center of the destroyed laboratory, surrounded by the bodies of creatures that had terrorized entire civilizations. She wasn't even breathing hard. "That's where you're wrong," she said. "Humans aren't a prey species. We're the species that made every other predator on our planet wonder if maybe they should be running from us instead." She began walking back toward the Ancient One's chamber, stepping over the creatures she had defeated. "You want to know why I'm not afraid? Because I come from a species that didn't just survive being hunted by things bigger and meaner than us. We became the things that hunt the things that hunt." Behind her, alarms were sounding as more creatures moved to intercept her. Smiled. "And that's not even the scary part." "What is the scary part?" the Ancient One asked, and for the first time in millions of years, there was uncertainty in its voice. Its voice carried throughout the station and up to the ships in orbit. "The scary part is that I'm just one human, and I'm not even a soldier or a hunter by profession. I'm a scientist who happens to remember what her grandmother taught her about dealing with dangerous animals." She paused at an intersection where new creatures were gathering. Things with too many teeth, too many claws, too many ways to kill. They blocked every corridor. Didn't look for an escape route. She looked at them the way a human looks at animals that need to be managed. "The scary part," she continued, "is what happens when a species like mine decides that something needs to be stopped. Because humans don't just fight predators. We make predators extinct." The creatures charged toward her from all directions, activated her last set of prepared traps, and began to show the galaxy what human persistence predation really meant. In the chamber far below, the Ancient One pressed against its weakening containment field and realized something that chilled it to its immortal core. It was no longer the most dangerous predator on the station. That title now belonged to the small human, who had just declared war on everything that hunted in the darkness between stars. Walked back into the Ancient One's chamber with the blood of galactic apex predators on her hands and clothes. Behind her, the station's corridors were littered with creatures that had destroyed entire civilizations. She had hunted them through their own territory and won. The Ancient One had watched everything through the station's sensors. Its massive form pressed against the cracking containment field, but for the first time in millions of years, it wasn't trying to break free to destroy. It was trying to break free to understand. Explain, the creature demanded. Explain how a species barely old enough to leave its home world can defeat predators I have been perfecting for eons. Sat down on a piece of broken machinery, tired but not defeated. It's simple. You made them too specialized. Every one of your creatures is perfectly adapted to hunt specific types of prey using specific methods. But humans were the opposite. She pulled out her grandmother's field kit and began cleaning her wounds with practiced efficiency. We're persistence predators, but we're also tool users. We're pack hunters, but we can work alone. We're ambush predators, but we can track prey for days. We're whatever we need to be. The Ancient One shifted, its form cycling through shapes that hurt to look at. Your species should not exist. Generalist predators are weak. Specialists always win. On most worlds, you'd be right, agreed. But Earth was different. Our world was so full of specialized apex predators that the only way to survive was to become more adaptable than all of them combined. She stood up and walked closer to the containment field. You know what the most dangerous predator on Earth was when humans were evolving? Other humans. We spent millions of years in an arms race with ourselves, becoming smarter, more creative, more ruthless with every generation. The Ancient One's voice carried something had never expected to hear from it, curiosity. And now? Now we're the species that made apex predators extinct for fun. We hunted creatures like your void stalkers not because they threatened us, but because we were bored. We turned predation into entertainment. Activated her communicator, knowing the entire galactic consortium was listening. But here's what you really need to understand about humans. We don't just hunt predators, we domesticate them. She began working on the containment field with tools from her kit. The Ancient One watched in fascination as she modified the energy patterns. "What are you doing?" "I'm making you an offer," said. "You can break free right now. Your containment field will fail in the next few minutes whether I help or not. You can take your remaining creatures and try to conquer the galaxy." She paused in her work. "But if you do that, you'll be making the same mistake every predator that ever hunted humans made. You'll be teaching us to see you as a threat that needs to be eliminated." The Ancient Ones form into something resembling interest, and the alternative. Continued modifying the containment field, but now she was strengthening it instead of weakening it. The alternative is that you become the first primordial entity to understand what partnership with humans means. Partnership. The concept seemed to confuse the creature that had existed since before most stars were born. "Humans don't just kill the things that hunt us," explained. "We study them. We learn from them. Sometimes we even make them our allies. The wolves that hunted our ancestors became our dogs. The horses that ran from us became our partners. The dangers that threatened us became the tools we used to face even greater dangers." She stepped back from the modified containment field. It was now stronger than before, but she had added something new, a communication interface. "I'm offering you a choice no one has ever offered you before," said. "Instead of being an enemy that gets destroyed, you can be a consultant. Help us understand the dangers that exist in deep space. Teach us about the threats that are still out there beyond our current knowledge." The Ancient One was silent for long moments. When it spoke again, its voice was thoughtful. "In exchange for what?" "In exchange for not being extinct," said simply. "Because that's what happens to things that threaten humanity. We don't just fight them. We erase them from existence so completely that future generations wonder if they ever existed at all." She activated the communication interface. Immediately, signals began coming through from the evacuation ships in orbit. Voices in a dozen alien languages, all asking the same questions. How was she still alive? How had she defeated creatures that had ended civilizations? Selected the command frequency and spoke to Captain Ra of the Golden Wind. "Captain, this is Doctor. The station is secure." Silence. Then, Doctor, our sensors show massive casualties among the escaped predators. Did a rescue fleet arrive? No, Captain, I handled it. Another pause. You handled it. Doctor, those creatures have destroyed entire star systems. I know, said calmly. I read their files before I hunted them. The communication channel exploded with voices as representatives from all the major species began speaking at once. They demanded to know what weapons she had used. They wanted to understand how she had survived energy-draining creatures. They calculated that her success was mathematically impossible. Silence them all with a simple statement. I didn't survive them, I hunted them. There's a difference. The Ancient One leaned forward as far as its modified containment would allow. Your species truly is unique. Very well, human, I accept your offer, but not out of fear. Then why? The creature's form shifted to something that might have been a smile. Because in all my existence, you are the first being to make predation sound like an art instead of a necessity. I wish to learn this art. Nodded and began broadcasting on all frequencies. This is Doctor of the research station. The containment breach has been resolved. All escaped predators have been neutralized or secured. The Ancient One has agreed to a cooperation agreement with the Galactic Consortium. She paused, knowing that her next words would change everything. I'm also formally requesting that the Consortium establish a new department, the Human Xenobiology Corps. Because if today has taught us anything, it's that when something truly dangerous breaks containment, you don't need the strongest fighters or the fastest ships. You need the species that taught predators to be afraid of being prey. In the hours that followed, rescue ships arrived to find calmly the defeated creatures and making notes about improvements to containment protocols. The Ancient One, now secured in its strengthened prison, was already providing information about cosmic threats that the galaxy's civilizations had never imagined. But the real change happened in the way other species looked at humans. The who had prided themselves on being the galaxy's greatest warriors requested training from human military advisors. The masters of energy manipulation asked to study human persistence hunting techniques. They calculated that humans represented the most efficient predator evolution they had ever encountered. Within a month, human consultants were stationed at every high-security facility in the galaxy, not as guards or soldiers, but as the specialists called in when something too dangerous for normal protocols needed to be managed. Returned to Earth to a hero's welcome, but she was already planning her next research project. The Ancient One had mentioned other entities sleeping in the deep spaces between galaxies, things that made the creatures on the station look like household pets. She smiled as she read the reports. The galaxy was full of dangers that other species considered unstoppable nightmares, but came from a species that had spent millions of years proving that there was no such thing as an unstoppable predator, just predators that hadn't met the right human yet. Her grandmother would have been proud.